Hello, everyone, and welcome to the State of the Nation with Francis Duru. This episode is titled Reimagining Our Representation in a Democracy. Democracy, they say, is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The big question is, do we have this definition reflected in what we have in Nigeria today? Do we have equal representation? How have we been represented on critical issues, on critical national issues? These and many more are the things that we are going to be looking at in our discussion today. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. It's a new episode and it's going to be a great time with you. We have been having this conversation on the state of the nation as we continue to engage in critical conversations that you can always trust that we will have a very good time in discussing them on this show. Democracy. Yes, it's the word and the representation of people in a democratic setting. In Nigeria today, you will always have this particular argument where people might want to inform you that, in representation in the government, and when I mean representation, we are going to be focusing on the people that are actually elected by the people, not appointment, but via election. And that speaks volume of the fact that for election of representative in the National Assembly, people are given one person that are put together as legislative house or to represent them in this particular setting. And that is where we talked about the government by the people in democracy. Because a voice has gone into the legislative house to speak on the behalf of a group of people that they are representing. But one of the big question mark is, what is the total number of people as regards to the national issue that we are currently discussing on the state of the nation, and how have we fared in this particular representation? If you don't take time to look at the numbers, you might just assume that the North had or has more representation in the legislative house, both looking at the Senate House and the House of Representatives, than the South. But when you look at these numbers, you will realize that of a truth, the reverse is the case. In the House of Assembly, we have 360 representatives. In the Senate, we have 109. Of this number, of this 109, the North has 57 people representing across the Northeast, the Northwest, and the North Central. In the South, we have 54. So the difference in the Senate is actually by 1. But when you go to the House of Assembly, then you see that the number becomes very, very different. In the North, we have 169 representatives from the North. But when you go to the South, you will have 191. I repeat again, 191. So the argument that the North is more represented in the legislative is actually not true based on these numbers. But one thing that you would continue to see is the fact that you if you don't look at this number properly, you get to be misinformed about this. But you would agree with me that the thing that is actually not missing is how we have been represented in all of this. In our last episode, we tried to highlight what is so wrong about the recently passed petroleum bill and the content of that petroleum bill, and how disenfranchising that particular bill is for the indigenous people where this petroleum exploration is going on and will continue to go on, as regards to the environmental hazard and all of those things that comes with oil exploration. When you look at that particular scenario, you'll be forced to ask, how have the representative of these places, how have they fared in voting for and against some of this kind of bill? In today's episode, as we discuss and reimagine this representation, you begin to now see that the major issue here is actually not about the number. It is about the quality of representation. The senators and the House of Representatives go there not representing the people, but representing their interests. You will recall that we discussed one of these when I highlighted in one of our episodes that we titled "We Are the Victim." In that particular episode, we had discussed that the political elite in Nigeria will always find a way to harmonize their interests when it comes to things that concern us. At no time would you see them have differences in all of those national issues that are so glaring about the interests of the people. So, what is the essence of having somebody in the National Assembly that only represents their own personal interests but not the interests of the people? This is exactly the big question that is so wrong about the democracy. So if people are there to represent the interests of people who voted for them, and they are there not doing that, it means that democracy in Nigeria is actually not the government of the people, not the government by the people, and certainly not the government for the people. Because in the end, the interest that is being served is the interest of this political elite. And one funny thing that happens is that at the point of most of these conversations, religion differences, ethnic differences, and all the national things that they will always highlight that divides us on other issues, all of this will disappear when they want to find a way to harmonize what their interest is. Then we now go to what would their interest be. their interests have always been the continuous access to the national treasury, that it's a business for them. In that same atmosphere, you and I becomes the victim. Just think about this number for a minute. If the North is having 169 in the National House of Assembly, and the South has 191, the question is, why do we have to deal with this set of voting on sensitive national issues? Recently, the National Assembly passed the Electoral Reform Bill. And like others that they've passed, including the approval, the indiscriminate approval of loan, that they have continued to mortgage the future of the generations unborn, you see them align again to do things that clearly is not in the interest of the people. And when you look at some of the reasons that are highlighted and they give, you would understand that, oh, something is really, really wrong. You would see clearly that indeed democracy is not the government of the people in Nigeria. Democracy is not the government by the people. Democracy is not the government of the people. In the word of Fela Anikulapo Kuti, you will begin to now see what Fela had seen that made him to say, do we say democracy is existing in Nigeria? As I paraphrase, Fela said, I paraphrase Fela, he said, is this democracy? This is not democracy. This is actually the demonstration of CRAZE. Meaning, we have a bunch of people representing us that are in a building demonstrating their craziness. Fela couldn't be far from the truth when you dig deep into what is contained in the electoral reform. Indeed, it is very clear that the political elite had already planned for 2023 even before we get to 2023. It is very clear that they've voted against electronic transfer of collated results of election, citing cybersecurity issues and all frivolous issues. Permit me to digress and take us back into the historical development of this electoral bill. By the time we were close to 2019 election, this same group of politicians had sent a half-baked bill, which of course again was rejected by the president, who sent it back and forth between the Senate, the House of Assembly, and the presidency, and the president refused to sign that bill. You know why? Because they had already perfected their plan for 2019 election to go their way the way they have already planned it. And ascending to that particular bill, even as half-baked as that bill was, would have created a serious issue that they will have seen, even the blind could have seen that even in the court of law. And this was what they saw that made them to say, no, we cannot allow this to actually go on. And that particular bill was not passed. When that particular bill was not passed, they gave the reason that until this election passes, the 2019 election passes, that's when they can actually look at the bill. After the election up to today, you now see what we already have again as a bill that is also even more half-baked than we can even ever imagine. So now when you look at all of this, it brings a consciousness in your mind that indeed we are in a precarious situation where everyone is not time to actually keep quiet. This is a moment to begin to hold these people accountable on these critical national issues that they continue to align with all of the things that are not representing the voices that represent what we want. In 2015, according to the deep dive intelligence analysis of the INEC publicly available data on the 2015 presidential election, Buhari was a beneficiary of possibly fraudulent votes that were marked and legitimized by incident forms. You will recall that during 2015, incident forms were used to cover for people who could not be accredited. But let me shock you with the number. About 476,490 people were accredited to vote in 2015. Of this number, 13,536,311, which is a whopping 42.6% of the voters, actually didn't do biometrics, meaning we could not ascertain whether they are registered voters. We could not ascertain whether it is the right person that was actually voting. We could not ascertain the credibility of those people who voted. That is about 14 million of 31 million. Let that sink in. That is about 42% of this number were not accredited, and they used incident form for it. Of this number, 10,184,720 were cumulative votes from the states that Buhari won. What does this tell you? It tells you that about 30% of the people who voted or whose votes were accumulated for the total victory that was announced for Buhari in 2015 were people we cannot validate. And when you understand what data is and you talk about a cumulated data that you cannot validate, you talk about 30% margin error. That is a whopping size of an issue that cannot be ignored. Little wonder why they had to pass a bill and give all these excuses, because they had already arranged, planned, discussed, settled 2023 on behalf of you and me. This should be a big outcry. There should be a resounding unrest in the mind of all Nigerians that 2 years plus to an election, these men had already decided the results before we even get there. What then is the value of your PVC? And it is also a big source to injury when you look at the fact that this is generally being ignored with every other activities, being the topmost things that is, going on in the country. These men had assumed that all of us are really dumb. These men have assumed that all of us are stupid. And I tell you, we are not stupid. And it is time we begin to hold specific representatives that are representing our interests in the National Assembly to account. Everyone listening to me today must look at how their own representative actually voted. Do you know that the 3 senators representing Anambra State were absent during this most crucial voting, most crucial point that would determine the future of this country? If the process of selecting leaders that would make a difference for our nation is being manipulated, what else is not manipulated? And when you refer back to the reason why they want to justify this same manipulation that they have already set up for 2023, they give you reason that you begin to ask them, what now happens to all the international transactions and banking system and communication system that we deem to be reliable and safe? If we can actually access this same unprecedented loan that we continue to take from China and other places from IMF, and we can have a system that people cannot manipulate the numbers and figures, how else do you want to convince me that election cannot be transmitted electronically? Because you already know that the system would make it practically impossible. When you look back to 2015, you will now understand again into 2019, you will understand exactly how all of these things actually played out as we approach 2019 election and the removal of the then Chief Justice of Nigeria from the Supreme Court. Because if the election had been conducted with that kind of person still the head of Supreme Court, then the cases is a done deal. What makes it even more painful is when you begin to look at that these same House of Assembly members, both Senate and House of Rep, had entertained the budget of 1 billion naira for the accreditation of voters by INEC. If you can spend such money for accreditation, why else do you now feel that to be able to talk about electronic transmission, you will convince me that you don't want the election numbers to be manipulated? What else are you talking about manipulation? I'm a data analyst. I have background in data. Validation is about looking at the electronic figure and randomly checking the record of the paper. The paper document will still be available. And that is where the validation and data quality assurance and assessment will take place. But when you have done this, it is very clear what they want to actually achieve. So sorry to burst your bubble, Nigerians. 2023 has already been decided for us. And it is time for us to begin to hold accountable our politicians. It's time for us to begin, in fact, as one of my friends said, you know that it is even realistic that we begin to hold stone in our hand and begin to stone all the representatives that are currently representing us in the House of Assembly and their leadership, as we begin to expose these truths to people and begin to see that we are in a country where people have continued to take us for granted. And that is the state of the nation. It is a very, very serious issue, and it is something that should give everyone sleepless night. Whether you are from the east, you are from the west, you are from the north, you are from the south, we cannot continue to hide under this same premise that the north is more represented in the House of Assembly. Yes, we understand the silent majority when it comes to the fact that they have found a way to harmonize their political ideology. And you see the use of the word Hausa Fulani as one. But down south, we have the Yoruba, we have the Igbo, we have the Bibiu, we have the Shekiri, we have the Ijaw, we have the Bini, we have the Distin, we have a clear line between the southwest, the south-south, and the southeast. And they continue to make sure that this is, clearly, these margin lines are bolded in capital letter and ensure that it is very obvious. Why? Because this is the same reason why these numbers have not mattered. It is even beyond the fact that the number does not actually count. It is also shameful that even with the same numbers, we have people representing themselves but not representing the interests of the people. It is time for us to begin the grassroots movement of holding our representative accountable. If you are a Nigerian today and you are not worried about this singular bill, which represents everything that is wrong with Nigeria, which highlights everything that is wrong that we continue to say, it is time for us to, go beyond all of the game plan of these people that find a way to pitch you and I against each other on general issues, and when it comes to critical national issues that concerns their ends meet, because they are all career politicians, they find a way to harmonize and continue to do this thing. They have already settled 2023 election. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a great time to have you on the show. And I must tell you that we will continue on this show to be looking at even most of these sensitive matters that might look very difficult to even discuss them in the first place. So thank you and God bless you. Yes, welcome back. I have a comment from one of our esteemed viewer who has said, the colonial template left us this way. True, you are not far from the truth. If you look historically into how elections were conducted for this House of Representative into 1964, 65, and into independence, you would see how this particular rigging template was handed over and institutionalized over the period of time. But again, we cannot keep quiet. And this comment is coming from Benjamin Akin Moyeje. It is really the fact. The foundation is rotten. The foundation is stinky. And that is the problem. And this and many more are the reason why I have come to the realization that it is time that we look at pressing the reset button for Nigeria. It is the moment that we need to talk about, putting all the cards on the table. So thank you for everyone. We've had comments that nice job, keep the great work. We'll continue to do that. So thank you everyone. Like I said again, please, we are improving by the day, and this would appreciate that you continue sending in your comments so that we would look at them together and also use them to inform the next conversation that we are going to be having. So once again, we appreciate everyone, and thank you so much for being here with us. We really love you.